100 reviews. I cannot believe we are finally at this point, and I really can't thank you guys enough for supporting this channel. I recently asked you all what game you would like for me to dedicate the 100th review to, and after compiling the suggestions together, at least 50% of you wanted me to talk about Persona 3. I wasn't expecting it, but nevertheless, I am very grateful for every single one of your votes. It shocked me with how many I received, and it really touched my heart. Or stole my heart in this case.
Now then, let's discuss Persona 3, or should I say Shin Megami Tensei Persona 3. We're at a time where Persona wasn't quite its own series yet. This one certainly introduces a lot of firsts to the series. It was the first one to completely move to the third dimension, it was the first one to have a fully voiced cast, it was the first one to bring in all-out attacks to expand the combat, and it changed how battles work to make it more streamlined compared to Persona 1 and 2. But most importantly, it was the first title to implement the social link system, where you had to socialize with your party members and various NPCs to allow more experience points when fusing personas, but you also learn more about that character in the process. It's thanks to Persona 3 that social links are such a huge part of the series that it's so difficult to imagine a Persona game without it. Hold your horses, we'll get there eventually. Western audiences didn't get the original version of Persona 3 for the PlayStation 2 until around 2007, but like Persona 4 Golden, 3 eventually got a re-release in 2008 called Persona 3 FES. The FES apparently coming from the word festival. Not sure what that has to do with anything, but it was an add-on disc that contained fixes and updates to the core game, as well as a brand new 20 to 30 hour epilogue to play called The Answer. I'll go more into that later. Then at around 2010 in North America and 2011 in Europe, Persona 3 got re-released again for the PSP and was called Persona 3 Portable, with some radically different changes. The most notable of these changes were being able to control all of the party members, yeah I know, I'll go over that too, as well as the battle system acting more like it does in Persona 4, and the world traveling now being reduced to this sort of point and click style, but the dungeon crawling was still in 3D. I can only guess that the PSP couldn't handle 3D for both the world traveling and dungeon crawling, so they had to simplify the world traveling for Persona 3's main location, Iwatodai, as well as simplify the cutscenes. You know, the world traveling I don't really mind that much personally. In some cases I actually find it a lot faster to go through the game this way, because the world of Persona 3 is honestly not one of my favorites so far from the entries I've played. It doesn't have the small town charm like Inaba did in Persona 4, nor does it have the lively atmosphere of Shibuya from Persona 5. Iwatodai just looks kinda bleak to me. The colors are rather dull, and aside from Polonia Mall, there aren't a lot of landmarks that really stick out, so stripping down the traveling to this style didn't bother me greatly. What did diminish the experience a little for me though was the way they handled cutscenes. Conversations between characters always amount to static backgrounds with the characters' expressive portraits in the foreground as if you're looking at a visual novel, and the anime cutscenes have been scrapped entirely, only showing still images with dialogue above it, and a couple of times they don't even do that, even during the more dramatic moments. It kinda ruins a lot of the comedic moments as well without the visuals to back it up, so it's more like you're being told what happens instead of being shown, and it's a shame because there's some rather funny writing here and there. The graphic novel style is not really a huge deal in the end, and some players may only find this a small sacrifice to pay, but I know there are some people who really can't put up with this style, which I can kind of understand. I do like that Vincent from Catherine makes a cameo in Portable though, and encourages you to play the game to learn more about his story before Catherine even came out. That's pretty neat. But arguably the most important change to Persona 3 Portable is the option to play as a female protagonist. There aren't any differences character-wise, she's exactly the same as the male protagonist, but playing as her gives you access to different cutscenes, including having a girls' night during the holidays, and visiting the Yamagi Inn from Persona 4 and meeting a younger Yukiko. The female also has different social links you can't access as the male, like Rio from the girls' sports team, as well as allowing you to date any of the guys you like, so that's good for series fangirls. To this day though, the female protagonist doesn't have an official name given by Atlus. She even recently made a comeback in Persona Q2 for the 3DS, but she still doesn't have a canonical name, and I don't know why this is. Also, why is she still the only female protagonist you can play as in this series? Atlus have so far not brought this gender feature back in later Persona games, and I really think they should. It's a great mechanic, and it gives you good reason to consider replaying it to see the different outcomes. The only other thing Persona 3 Portable doesn't have that FES does is the addition of the answer. All you have is the base game and nothing else. else. It's also way more expensive than FES for some reason, both physically and digitally, especially physically. On the PSN store, at least in the UK anyway, it costs about 3 times as much as FES does, and 3 times as much as Persona 4 Golden, which completely boggles my mind. I find it's better to buy the bundle that contains both P3P and Persona 2 Innocent Sin. With this in mind, as well as all of the changes in P3P that I just mentioned, this makes choosing a definitive version of Persona 3 extremely tricky. Do you prefer the faster gameplay at the cost of a much inferior presentation, or would you prefer your Persona games to look nice but not have the best turn-based gameplay?
For the 100th review, we have a lot to compare and contrast here, but the one thing that isn't different between them is the story. Just like my Persona 4 and 5 reviews, I'm not going to spoil the entire plot, but will still give you a general idea of what the goal is. I also want to thank my brother Jude for helping me record the entirety of the journey in Persona 3 FES, which is basically the main game. That saved me a lot of work, while I've also been recording the answer and Persona 3 Portable, so thanks very much for that. Don't worry, I've completed the journey myself fairly recently. My experiences are still fresh in my head, and I've even gone through the game again to try and tackle the New Game Plus boss.
So as I said earlier, this story takes place in Iwa Todai, where once again our protagonist has just moved there to accommodate to his new school life because his parents have simply died. Now that threw me off guard at first, I'll give Persona 3 that. It doesn't come into play much in the story, but at least that gives us an excuse as to why his parents don't ever call, unlike you and Ren's parents who never contacted them once. By the way, the kid's official name is Makoto Yuki, though I see most Persona fans call him Minato Yuki since that's what he's called in the manga. Not sure why that's considered better, but I'll stick with Minato anyway because having 2 Makotos would only get confusing. Since the female doesn't have a canon name by Atlas, you may have to rely on fan names given to her. One of them I found was Minako Yuki to serve as a feminine version of Minato, but the one I went with was Hamiko Arizato, Mr. Roboto. Moving on, so because Minato and Hamiko have lost their parents, that means they'll have to live in these dorms provided for them throughout the school year. This is where they meet Yukari and Mitsuru, who both go to the same school and will help show them the ropes. It's not long though before we find out that Yukari and Mitsuru are surveying our protagonist to see if they wield what they call the potential. And then the night after that, another student named Akihiko, who also lives in the same dorm, accidentally leads a shadow to their location, the shadows once again being the main enemies of the game. Yukari takes Minato and Hamiko up to the dorm's roof, but the shadows are there waiting for them, and this is where the protagonists find out they have the power to summon personas. But the way they do this is a bit different to Persona 4 and 5. Those who have the potential are able to call forth their personas, but to do that, you have to point this gun called an evoker up to your head and pull the trigger. It's not an actual gun, of course, but why the hell would anyone want to do that? I'd hate to see how the testing stages went. The protagonist, as expected, is the only one that's able to summon multiple personas, and he or she is assigned the leader of the Specialized Extracurricular Execution Squad, or SEES for short because they couldn't fit the full name on business cards. SEES are dedicated to exterminating every shadow during what's known as the Dark Hour, a hidden 25th hour in the day that only those with the potential can see, and most of the shadows seem to come from this giant tower known as Tartarus. Those who don't know about Tartarus and the Dark Hour all turn into coffins and awaken the next day, but if someone does discover the Dark Hour and have their minds eaten by the shadows, then they'll instead suffer from what SEES call apathy syndrome and become a part of the Lost, which are basically brain-dead zombies. This is the only real jeopardy of the Dark Hour, because without that, it doesn't really cause that much harm to others until near the end of the game. It is admittedly rather spooky and eerie to see more and more of the Lost appear as the story goes on, but outside of SEES, no one seems to care or do anything to fix the problem. Everyone just sort of leaves them standing in the same location, hoping the situation sorts itself out. Up until the climax, the main threat mostly comes from these special shadows that appear during every full moon. This is where the series' staple time limit mechanic comes into play for Persona 3. A full moon only appears once a month, and you'll need to spend that time raising your social links and climbing numerous blocks of Tartarus. I really love this idea Persona 3 has going for it with its story. An extra 25th hour in the day that very few people know of with a tower that's super high and super dangerous to climb is a very intriguing premise. But despite being a 60 to 70 hour game, that initial idea isn't expanded upon a great deal. You learn about the origins of Tartarus and the Dark Hour fairly early on, and you occasionally cross paths with this anti-SEES of sorts called Strega, whose leader looks like Alucard on crack. Also, like I said, there are some pretty serious stakes during the finale, but in between those moments, there's not a whole lot to be on the edge of your seat about. At least compared to Persona 4 and 5, I should stress. There aren't that many surprises or twists and turns, and the ones that are there you can see coming fairly easily. Like imagine if in Persona 4 you didn't have the murder mystery plot in addition to the TV world. The TV world is strange and interesting, yes, but after a while you get used to it. The murder mystery acted as the main driving force for the story, because it not only affected the TV world, but also heavily affected the real world. Real people people were being killed off, and the stakes were gradually raised as the plot carried on. I just think Persona 3's story needed that extra edge, and true, there is the matter of the lost, but it's so inconsequential to the game's world that it almost doesn't matter. If no one in Iwatodai cares about these people losing their humanity, why should I? The only saving grace to the story, aside from having a faster starting pace than Persona 4, only taking an hour or so to get going, are some of the characters and their interactions. I don't think C's have nearly the same spark as the investigation team and the Phantom Thieves, and they often feel more like co-workers than actual friends, but I like a few of these guys and gals. Mitsuru I thought I would get bored of pretty quickly with her all work no play attitude, but she does learn to loosen up a little and bring out some good quips here and there. She didn't click with me as much as Makoto did in Persona 5, but Mitsuru's still a pretty cool lady. Koromaru's another great character, not just because I'm a dog lover and he's so loyal that he protects his dead master's grave, but he actually becomes a party member after a couple of bosses. He carries a knife in his mouth to slice shadows, and he can summon a persona himself. That's just amazing. Fuka isn't a very good navigator for C's, and her voice actors can be pretty terrible most of the time, but I do really like her shy and reserved personality, and Aigis ended up being one of my favorite Persona characters of all time. I have the Figma figurine of her as a birthday present from my girlfriend Hannah. Thanks very much for that. It's looking pretty awesome next to my statues of Joker and the twins. Aigis' character arc isn't the most unique per se. She's a robot built as a weapon to destroy shadows, but she still has a conscience and wants to understand humans, hopefully becoming one herself. Some of Aigis' lines can be quite corny as well, but damn it, she's just so adorable. Whether it's misunderstanding certain human traits or when she's just happy to be with the group, it's really hard not to like her. That and her design is just awesome, and seeing her use guns instead of melee weapons makes her look incredibly badass. Akihiko has some good moments too, but his obsession with training got old really fast. Junpei as the best friend of the group is a little more respectful than Yosuke in Persona 4, but still not the greatest character of them all. Ken was just kinda there, I didn't love him, I didn't hate him, and Shinjiro didn't get much time for me to care about him at all. They do slightly improve this in Portable because he's an actual social link you can level up, but he's not my favorite C's member despite that. That awkward smile says it all, folks. But oh man, I never hated a main Persona character as much as Yukari. Jesus Christ, what a bitch. She's always smack-talking everyone and bringing them down, frequently jumping to conclusions way too quickly, is selfish beyond belief, and won't stop bringing up her deceased father, even at a couple of inappropriate times. I only keep her in my party to be the designated healer, and in the answer, Yukari's an even worse human being, which I didn't think was possible, but I'll save that for an extended thoughts video. Lastly, and I know he's not a party member, but I just have to mention the acting from Cease's chairman Akutsuki. Who the hell thought this was fine? Apparently it's the same guy who voices Igor in this game in Persona 4, so he can pull off eccentricity fine, but when he's asked to play as a normal, boring human with terrible puns, whew, man, he's awful.
You must be tired from all the excitement. You should go to bed early. As they say, the early bird catches the bookworm. Please forgive the pun.
So, okay, the members of C's are a little hit and miss. Putting that aside though, there's still a lot of potential for some fun gameplay using the concept of Tartarus. Perhaps some curveballs could be thrown in to make exploration a little more tricky, or maybe put in some puzzles to get the gears in your head turning. Unfortunately, this is another thing I feel that Persona 3 doesn't take advantage of. Tartarus and dungeon crawling doesn't get any more complicated than what it starts with, and most importantly, it's so damn hard.
Holy shit, this is one of the most frustratingly difficult RPGs I've ever played. Enemies hit way harder in Persona 3 than they've ever done in 4 and 5, and screwing up even one move, whether it's choosing the wrong attack or luck not being in your favor and causing you to miss, may likely ruin everything you've worked for. Part of that is because FES's battle mechanics don't work quite the same way as they do in Persona 4 and 5. The aim of the game is still to abuse an enemy's weakness to knock them over, blowing your brains out in the process, and perform an all-out attack once you've toppled them all over, but attacking acts a little differently. In Persona 4 and 5, knocking down an enemy with their weakness would initiate a 1 more, which lets you attack again. But in FES, you can only earn a 1 more by singularly toppling an enemy. If you try using a skill that affects multiple enemies and still knock one over, that doesn't count. Likewise, whenever your party or an enemy is knocked down, they will waste a turn getting back up, which can be handy in some cases, but if a toppled enemy gets hit again, they immediately spring back up, which doesn't help. Though again, the same can happen to you. to. That's all at least manageable, but what you can't rely on so much is your party being controlled by the AI. You only control the protagonist, and there is absolutely no way to manually control everybody else. And I don't care what anyone says, it is a freaking stupid idea. The AI is not downright terrible, but 95% of the time they're just incredibly inefficient. Take a typical battle setup as an example where every enemy has the exact same weakness. Normally, this is where you would use skills that hit multiple enemies like Mabufudyne or Magarudyne, and rarely does the AI think to do that, but they'll mostly decide to knock down each enemy one by one to ensure that they get a one more, which wastes a lot more skill points than they really need to. In Mitsuru's case, sometimes the AI won't even try to use spells or physical attacks, but instead use ailments that are almost completely unreliable because they miss so often. And other times, she won't think to just finish off an enemy that's low on health and end up performing Mind Charge or something to power up their next attack. Just kill them, don't waste SP and precious time. The closest you've got to any sort of control to your other party members is the tactics menu, where you give various orders to each character, like focusing on a particular enemy, knocking them down, or as for Aegis, activating Orgia mode where her attacks hit harder, but she'll overheat after a few turns and will need to step back to cool down a bit. I would also advise scanning every enemy as soon as you can because that'll help the AI think of a better strategy, though scanning for weaknesses in this game takes a little time to actually do so. To be fair, once the enemy is scanned, you're shown every one of their weaknesses and resistances, so you don't need to experiment that often. The only time this doesn't work is on the mini-bosses, but I'd still recommend doing so to make the AI think a bit more cleverly. I'm not sure which way I prefer scanning in my Persona games, but I guess they have their pros and cons. Now with Persona 3 Portable, you can still have the AI control the rest of your party if you want to, but one of the key new features added to it was the option to manually control them, which makes battles a hell of a lot less stressful. Not only that, but toppling enemies down acts just like it does in Persona 4, meaning you'll still get a one more no matter how you knock down an enemy, and you no longer have to worry about holding back on skills that cover multiple targets. Both versions of Persona 3 also have the debut of Shuffle Time, where upon clearing battles quickly and smoothly, you're presented a set of cards that affect you in different ways, like more experience and money, as well as capturing a certain persona. However, unlike Persona 4, instead of choosing which cards you want and which ones you don't, you actually have to watch the cards shuffle and try to land on the one you want. And there is no worse feeling than missing out on a bunch of experience points because you missed it by one card. Shuffle Time's not the only way to easily mess up in Persona 3, no matter which version of the game you're playing, and it's almost never your fault. Mini-bosses, for instance, are some of the worst I've seen in these games yet. The actual bosses during the full moon are surprisingly easy, only being a little harder to take down in Portable, but the mini-bosses? They hit like tanks and they sure take a beating. It's even more difficult when you've got 3 of them to deal with at a time, and if the protagonist perishes at any moment, that's game over. And unlike Persona 4, where you just restarted from the last floor you were on, once you die, you're back to your last save point, which is a freaking nightmare. Similar to Persona 4, climbing Tartarus involves you exploring randomly generated rooms where you need to find the stairs to let you go to the next floor, and after a certain amount of floors, you'll face a mini-boss. Totally, Tartarus has 264 floors with multiple sections for you to go through, but the end of each one will be blocked by a barrier until a specific day, so don't think you can clear the entire thing in one go. Once you enter Tartarus, there is absolutely no way to save your progress. The only save point you have is by the entrance, and you can only go back by finding these access points or waiting until you reach a teleporter just before the mini-boss that can take you to any floor. Fuka's able to bring you back at any time as well, but that's not until she's at a really high level. Until then, you may have access points to take you back, but if you do that, you'll still have to climb all of those floors again from the last checkpoint. So unless you're starving for SP, it's not really recommended. In Portable, however, you can continue from the last floor you were on just by clicking the door, which saves a lot more time and energy. On the other hand, unlike FES where your HP and SP are automatically restored once you're at the entrance, Portable asks that you pay a fee to do so, which can get pretty hefty very late in the game. But back to the save points, it's because of these consequences that I feel I have to rush through each floor of Tartarus. I'm always so scared of losing all of my progress, whether it's because I got a boatload of experience points that one time, or I found a chest that contained a rare item, or hundreds of thousands of yen. This is the first Persona game that's made me rage quit because a group of enemies might have gotten the advantage over me and used higher tiered spells that they somehow acquired way before I did. On top of that, after some time battling, you and your party will gradually get tired and can't perform as well, and will bail on you once you get back to the entrance. Hell, they'll sometimes try to bail bail on you in the middle of a battle. What kind of teammates are you? Now in Portable, this isn't so much of an issue. In fact, I don't know why they bothered adding it, because no one ever got tired there. And as FES goes on, you all last a little bit longer each time. But at the start of the game, while you're at the bottom of Tartarus, it does not take long for everyone to get tired, so you'll have to schedule multiple visits. However, you'll also have to make sure everyone, including yourself, is in a stable condition, which can take a couple of days after going through Tartarus because of illness or something like that. It is a pain in the ass to keep up with all of this, and even going through Tartarus itself isn't all that exciting a lot of the time. It has the same problem that Persona 4 had, where despite the rooms being randomly generated, you're still doing the same thing over and over again. In Persona 3 though, I think it's even worse due to how many floors there are, and apart from the very few background changes, every floor looks identical to each other. Now you can speed things along by having the party split up to search for the stairs, kill some enemies, and pick up treasure chests as they find them, but this does leave you very vulnerable. Because of this, I don't tend to use it at all unless I know I can get away with it, because Fuka takes forever to let me know where the next checkpoint is. And man, I wish the music in Tartarus was better. I suppose I should mention the soundtrack in this game. It's okay, but I definitely prefer Persona 4 and 5's OST. I'm very indifferent to the addition of rapping by this guy named Lotus Juice who appears in several Persona spin-offs. I know that taste in music is extremely subjective, this is just how I felt personally. And it sucks that I can't keep listening to the extra tracks you can have Fuka play while in Tartarus because some of them are pretty catchy. But then every time I go into a battle, it's always baby, 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 baby. Just let me listen to my beats. The girl, on the other hand, has some really sweet jams. I think she has the much better soundtrack. Sure, the battle theme's not quite as well known as Mass Destruction from FES, but some of the classroom music makes me want to dance, and I love the mini-boss track called Danger Zone, don't even dare. The girl also has probably my favorite town track in all the Persona games I played called Way of Life. This is such a good song, I just wish I could hear more of it before continuing the day. You know what I'd also like more of? Fusion spells. Why have these never come back? Basically, with two specific personas in your arsenal, you can combine their powers to unleash a brand new skill that either affects yourself, your party, or the enemies. They do cost a lot of SP for their own good, and a little more damage would have been nice, but this was a clever idea. I'd love to see these return in future Persona games. A bit of tweaking here and there, and they could be quite useful. In Portable, you don't even need the personas on hand, as the fusion spells are items that the protagonist can use at any point, but they are very limited, so don't go crazy with them. Activating fusion spells for the first time are also some of the requests you can complete, provided by this game's Velvet Room assistant, Elizabeth, or Fyodor if you're playing Portable. Elizabeth is without a doubt my favorite Velvet Room attendant in the entire series. Her misunderstandings of the real world are pretty humorous already, but I love how she has sort of a sadistic nature to her as well. I know Margaret from Persona 4 is usually the first pick for best Velvet Room attendant, and she does have an awesome design, but Elizabeth has the far better personality in my opinion. She's just outright hilarious at times.
One must first claw one's way to the top before relaxing in luxury.
Fyodor isn't too different from Elizabeth in terms of behavior, but he's more gentlemanly and modest than Elizabeth is. He's not quite the lovable doofus that we'll come to know him as in the Persona Q games, but he's alright in P3P. Oh yeah, I was talking about requests, wasn't I? Anyway, the requests Elizabeth and Theo give you can vary greatly, like killing specific enemies and collecting a dropped item, reaching the end of a Tartarus section and collecting a document, or doing something in the real world such as feeding a stray cat or asking your party for a possession of theirs. The requests are all optional, and honestly I wouldn't blame you for skipping some of them because there's over 100 and they can be really tedious. But you are rewarded for each one you complete, and some of them even unlock more personas. This is also how you can hang out with Elizabeth and Theo after school, which somehow doesn't waste a day, but you can see their personalities shine through by doing so. These requests and a fair few other ones though are on a time limit for some reason, so you can't take too long to do those ones. And it sucks so hard when you're doing so well to keep up to date with the current list only to miss one of them because you didn't get a possession or something on a very specific day. They somehow don't have it afterwards, and thus your completion list is tarnished for the rest of the game. I also tried my very hardest to tackle the Elizabeth and Fyodor fights, but even after going through New Game Plus, they still kick my ass. They're really made for the strongest persona in the game, Orpheus Telos, which requires you to max out every single social link, and that means several dozen more hours. Yeah, not right now, thank you. Portable doesn't have it much better with the added Vision quest where you meet up with Margaret and she challenges you with many tests. Half of these are just more difficult versions of the bosses you've faced, while the other half are more like puzzles and you're given a set party, personas, and levels. I hated these challenges. There was way too much trial and error to even be remotely fun. Bring up a guide for these ones because you'll be there forever trying to figure out the solution, trust me. And then once those are all done, you have the final challenge of beating Margaret in a fight, and Jesus Christ, she does not let up. It's easier to last longer in this fight than with Elizabeth and Theo, but I really don't like that you have a pseudo time limit before she completely nukes your ass. I know that was in Persona 5 as well, but I'm using some pretty high level personas here, and apparently that's still not enough. What do I have to do? And is there any way I can stop her from shouting? I've even been ranking up the side characters that you can also form social links with for some extra Persona XP. To the game's credit, they are better than Persona 4's. Not all of them, mind you, some of them can still be pretty boring or downright unlikable, and I'd still take Persona 5's side characters if I had the option. But Persona 3's got some good eggs here, mostly in Portable though. Yuko is such a sweet girl no matter if you play as a boy or a girl. Ryo doesn't dance on the sand and can be a little tough, but she means well and is pretty friendly. Maya's a great time when you play with her in this MMORPG, and Bebe is just so chill. His enthusiasm for Japan and sewing is utterly delightful. Mako, as far as kid characters go, isn't that annoying, and you feel sorry for her suffering from her parents' divorce. But good lord, I felt even more sorry for Sayori. She's a really nice girl who gets asked out by a boy only to have the boy's girlfriend find out and have the whole school basically call her a slut, even by the teachers. Sayori then gets suspended after having those accusations printed all over the school magazine. Her parents are extremely disappointed in her and believe all the lies and rumors, and then she has to move schools because of her tarnished reputation. My god, all of that happened to one poor girl just because of a misunderstanding. High school sucks, don't ever go there, kids. The social links overall, just like Persona 4, despite some of them being interesting and relatable, there are still too many to keep up with in a short amount of time. Well, I say a short amount of time, but Persona 3 weirdly doesn't give you enough time, but also gives you too much time. Most of the social links are only available during the day, but you don't have that many at the start of the game, very slowly gaining more and more. During the night, there are only 2 social links you can access. Tanaka, who's another series staple and runs a commodities business, and Mutatsu, who's a Buddhist monk that goes out drinking. Portable at least gives you the option to hang out with Koromaru, Ken, and Shinjiro, but that's only if you're going the female route. 2 social links during the night does not last long in a 60-hour game, so all you have left to do after maxing them out is to go to the mall and raise your social stats, and when that's all maxed out, there is nothing else to do. You would think until you acquired more social links that you could hang out with your party members, and while you can do this in Portable with Yukari and Junpei, FES thinks it's a good idea to let you do this 30 hours into the game. Oh my god, that is way too late. If the game's all about building friendships to become more powerful, then shouldn't socializing with Cs be pretty damn important? Even then, once you are able to do that, you can only hang out with Yukari and Fuka to start with. You never at any point socialize with Junpei or Akihiko, and you're not allowed to hang out with Mitsuru and Aigis until near the end of the game. What the hell? This is also where suddenly both versions of Persona 3 do not give you enough time to balance your social life. As soon as the final month arrives, you cannot waste a single day, because as soon as you're forced to step into Tartarus for the final time, that's it. You can't go back. And can we also talk about the relationship system for a second? This was definitely the first time Atlas started using it, because goddamn is it flawed. So normally in a Persona game, you have the option to say yes or no to go out with the girl you were talking to. But in Persona 3, you automatically start dating the girl after reaching a certain rank against your will. This means unless you don't want to earn extra experience points for your personas and stop hanging out with female characters entirely, you have to have multiple girlfriends. You can pick a girl to spend time with during special occasions like Christmas, but is that really a good thing? No, it isn't, and not surprisingly, you'll most likely find someone who's pissed off with you for hanging out with other girls, and thus you have to waste a whole freaking day trying to tell her you still love her. This does give you the opportunity to break up with the girl, but doing that also breaks the social link, and once it's broken, it can't be amended. It's completely permanent, and you can't level up that arcana ever again. So instead of Minato saying at any point, "I have a girlfriend, chill your beans," you have no choice but to keep up with this lie that you're still into that girl. I'm not usually one for dropping F-bombs in my reviews, but that is fucking disgusting. You have to use these girls for your own benefit, and no amount of cold showers could stop me feeling this dirty. This doesn't just apply to your girlfriends either. It can also happen to your other friends or girls that haven't become intimate with you yet. Social links can still be reversed if you say or do the wrong thing or take too long to raise their social links. And again, you'll have to waste a day fixing the problem. But even doing something like changing your plans to spend time with them on your days off can lead to the same result, because God forbid I actually have a life outside of these needy assholes. Chihiro, will you please stop calling me every single night? Take a hint and move on. Again, this is something Portable fixes. Here, they give you the choice to date the character, and saying no still lets you rank them up and accumulate more experience points points for your personas, just like how it was in Persona 4. I ended up having Hamako date Akihiko since I find he's the only decent guy around, except for Bebe of course. But by that point, you don't really get any opportunities to do stuff with him aside from Christmas. So now with everything covered for the journey, let's talk about the answer real quick, which you can only get in Persona 3 FES. It is not accessible in Portable in any shape or form. You're not missing much though, honestly, unless you really want some closure on the journey's ambiguous ending. The answer takes place immediately after the end of the journey, where C's find themselves trapped in their dorm and the day of March 31st is on a constant repeat. Then a hole starts appearing in the dorm and out comes Metis, another anti-shadow weapon similar to Aigis and the only other one of her kind. Yeah, no she isn't. Metis attacks everyone from C's, nearly killing them, but Aigis stops her by summoning Orpheus, Minato's original persona. So now Aigis has the power of the wild card like he does, meaning she can wield several personas, and she demands that Metis gives her some answers. Metis turns out is from the near future and was actually trying to save Aigis, calling her sister, because according to Metis, C's will at one point try to eradicate Aigis. Below the dorm also holds the Abyss of Time that's causing the day to repeat itself. Wanting to find out what's going on here, Aigis and the other C's members investigate the Abyss of Time and have to go through several doors and many stairs to reach the bottom. The Abyss of Time is basically like an upside down Tartarus. Metis wants to come along as well to make sure Aigis is safe, and she agrees to do so, but orders Metis not to kill any of her friends. At this point, until near the end of the answer, there is very little story to break up the battles. The only other cutscenes you get are flashbacks at the end of each door in the Abyss of Time. It does show you the beginnings of C's through each member, and even a younger Akihiko and Mitsuru, but it's not until you reach the bottom of the final door where the story actually continues. The answer also doesn't have social links or extra activities whatsoever for you to engage yourself in, so all you're doing is just battling over and over again, and occasionally accessing a door to Polonia Mall to stock up on supplies. And oh lord, you're going to need as many as you can carry because the answer somehow manages to be even harder than the journey. Structurally, it's the same as before. You explore randomly generated rooms and locate the stairs, except you're going down and you're controlling Aigis. I will say that because Aigis uses a gun, it's a lot easier to get the advantage over enemies. Beforehand, unless you're equipped with a bow, it's kind of a crapshoot whether or not you'll get the jump on the enemy. The timing is all over the place because heavier weapons have more wind-up, so you'll most likely be using the one-handed sword weapon since that's the fastest and easiest way to hit blobs of enemies and get the first turns in battle. Portable doesn't have it quite as bad since Hamako's only able to wield a naginata and she can swing it pretty quickly. One of the reasons the answer is so notoriously difficult though is that not only can even the most basic of enemies take out more than half of your health in a single hit, but a lot of battles love to throw in enemies with different weaknesses. This means you'll either have to have a specific set of personas until the next section, or you'll have to take specific party members until they're no longer needed. Some enemies and pretty much all the bosses also have evasion skills against their weaknesses, so even if you know what that enemy's weak to, there's a high chance your attack won't land anyway. I would also recommend trying very hard not to let a large group of enemies get the advantage over you, considering how much they hurt in the answer, because if they do, then you may as well reset the game. 9 times out of 10, that'll be an instant game over. This is where having the protagonist's death causing the game to end really starts taking the piss, and some of the boss battles are downright impossible to beat with these conditions, so grinding is most likely needed. My tip to you if you ever decide to play this is to not immediately go towards the boss once you reach the save point before it. Just leave and loop around those same floors again and acquire more experience points. Also bring Metis with you as often as you can because you'll be stuck with her during the climax, and trust me, you don't want her to be underleveled. I am glad I played the answer overall, but I really don't think I'm gonna do it again for a long while. If you just want to know more about the story, I would suggest looking up the cutscenes on YouTube or something. I usually prefer experiencing the story as opposed to simply watching it, but you're going to need quite a bit of patience to get through the answer. My overall time was around 20 hours, but including deaths, I'd say it was around 25 or so.
Are we done? Are we finally done? Have I covered everything? Oh my god, I knew this video was gonna be long, but I didn't expect it to be this long. Alright, so I really want to make it clear that even though I've been complaining about Persona 3 for the past 30 plus minutes, I don't dislike it by any means, including the answer. It is a lot older than Persona 4 and 5 as well, so I know not to expect as much depth, but I do think that Persona 3 has aged a fair bit compared to those games, which can really dampen it at times.
FES is not downright unplayable in any sense of the word, but I personally believe that Persona 3 Portable is the better version to play for first timers. Yes, the visuals don't even come close to FES's, hell that game's anime cutscenes aren't the best in the series either. They're not quite as detailed as Persona 4's despite being on the same console, but the gameplay in Portable is a lot more tolerable than FES's. I would still say play FES to have the best experience with the story, or I guess you could just watch the anime movies instead. Your call, but I suppose it doesn't really matter which one you play first. Each version has their own set of good things and bad things, but neither of them are what I would consider my favorite Persona games. The dungeon crawling can be a bit of a chore at times, and I really do wish that Tartarus and the Dark Hour was further enhanced because that's such a cool concept. Like, what if those people inside the coffins were actually those who were killed by shadows? Or if someone the characters knew was stuck inside? How much more interesting and dark would that have been? As is, I'd say half of the game is fairly enjoyable, but the other half was a lot of missed potential. Even when I was having fun though, there was usually something that angered me shortly after and reminded me why I have such mixed feelings with Persona 3. Then again, I have completed the game twice on both versions and even took the time to beat the answers, so it's gotta be doing something right. I don't know, this is a hard one, folks. I've said this maybe 3 or 4 times in past reviews, but I think this is another one of those games you need to play for yourself to make a final decision. You'll either love it or you'll just think it's good but not great, and I kinda fall on the latter. If I was asked to play Persona 3 again, then I wouldn't really hesitate, but a part of me would likely wish to play Persona 4 and 5 instead. I think Persona 3 really needs another remake of sorts with all the best bits from FES and Portable, and also update the graphics to suit the new engine. I would buy that in a heartbeat. As I said, I don't dislike either version of Persona 3 at all, they can just be unbelievably frustrating at times. But I did have some fun with them, more so in Portable, which is also playable on the PlayStation TV. It's how I managed to get footage for it.
Praise Nix, it's finally over. Well, hopefully I haven't pissed off too many Persona 3 fans, and you'll stick around as I cover the spin-offs next, before moving on to Persona 1 and 2. That will be the arena games, the dancing games, the Persona Q games, and possibly Persona 5 Scramble if that comes out in time. Maybe as next year's marathon? Let me know. Anyway, we've now basically talked about all the main Persona games that people really care about, but I'll always look forward to talking about more Persona whenever the opportunity arises. Next time though, since it's the Christmas season again, it only makes sense to talk about a Christmas game. What? It takes place during Christmas, that counts, doesn't it? Whew. Okay, good drink. Even though I've been complaining about not Persona 4, I love Persona 4. I really want to make it clear that even though so I know not to expect as much depth, but I really do think it's... But I'll always look forward to talking about more Persona whenever Hey folks, not many good outtakes in today's video unfortunately, so I'll quickly take the time to say thank you so much for supporting me through 100 reviews. Whether you've been with me since the beginning or just a newcomer, I really appreciate it. Thank you very much, and here's to another 100 reviews.